And we are live. Welcome, guys. Hi, Tish. So we've got 4 minutes before to go. I started a little bit early today just to make sure that everything was fine, because I did have a little bit of a tech issue 2 days ago, but all good today. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome, Natasha. So we've got 3 minutes to go. If anyone was watching that on replay later on, if you wanted to skip 3 minutes to skip the hellos, you're more than welcome to do so. Hi Viv, welcome. Welcome to Tower Hamlet Cemetery. Is my protocol okay? Yes, it seems to be okay today. For the ones that don't know what this is all about, when I tried to start the stream on Sunday night, I had a weird message that it should be RMVP, blah, blah, blah. So big drama, I had to start a new stream. And then I contacted Streamlabs. And apparently my encoding protocol was wrong. But it's not an option I have with YouTube. It's not something I can control. So I have to be careful with my protocol now. But it seems to be okay today. So we've not even... I was talking to the tech team, and we've not got to the bottom of this. We still don't know who's messed up my protocol. Hi, Hilary. Welcome. Nice to see you virtually this time. I've just met Hilary in person the other day. Hi, Laurie. So we've got 2 minutes to go. My protocol is perfect. Welcome, Charles I. I've just witnessed a big fight between a crow and a magpie, very violent. I didn't realize they were fighting that bad. And stupidly, I keep forgetting I'm a YouTuber. I should have just got my camera out and filmed them, but I didn't think. Because otherwise I could have done the voice off and do the argument, you know, oh, you slept with my wife, oh, you're going to have a bastard bird, or, you know, but hey ho. Who won? Well, none of them, because so basically they kind of left behind the graves, and then the crow came back with another crow, and they were fighting as well. Well, that crow could actually be Jack the Ripper. Well, I suppose I need to explain that one. No, it's true. There's a true theory. There's a ripologist that is convinced that Jack the Ripper was Charles Cross or Charles Lechmere. He's actually buried here somewhere. And apparently, when his great-granddaughter came to visit the cemetery, she followed a crow. I don't think she knew where he was. There's no grave or anything, it's just a spot. She followed a crow all the way to the grave. The video is online. The ripologist is called, what's his name? Edward Stowe, I think. So who knows? It could have been the same crow. It could have been a very violent incarnation. From Melody, nice. Welcome, Shoshi. And it's officially time to go. So welcome, guys. If anyone is new to me, you're very welcome. And for everyone else, welcome back. And just a bit of housekeeping as usual. You've got the chat. Feel free to use it. Ask me any questions. If I've missed any of your questions, don't get offended. Sometimes the chat goes a bit too quick. And for the ones that don't know me, I'm Nathalie, and let's go. Let me flip this camera around. So we are in Tower Hamlet Cemetery. It is one of the Magnificent Seven. You might, most of you might have been with me. We've been touring in a few of the Magnificent Seven already. The Tower Hamlet Cemetery is the last one. It was opened in 1841. You might know why those cemeteries were created on the outskirts of London, because we spoke about that in a few of my tours. People used to bury their dead in the city centre, in those little urban churchyards right next to the churches. And with the Industrial Revolution, with the population of London dramatically increasing, they kind of run out of places to bury their dead. Those little churchyards were completely saturated, stinky. They had to find a solution. And the solution came with the creation of those magnificent 7 cemeteries on what would have been at the time the outskirts of London. So Tower Hamlet is it's the last one of the 7, and it's probably the poorest one. Tower Hamlet is still today the poorest borough in London. And to give you an idea, in the 1860s, 80% of the burials here, they were actually public grave. You know, those communal grave in which you'd be buried with maybe 10 or 11 strangers, for people that could not afford to have a private burial. So you see a lot of those nice graves here on the side because those are prime spots. But if you go to the back, most of them never even had a monument. And you know, in many of those magnificent 7, we see some amazing grand monuments. Some of them might belong to merchants, doctors, politicians. But today I'd like to tell you the stories of the people you cannot see, the people that never had a monument because they just didn't have the money to pay for one. And we've got quite a few of those here. So before we go much further, I think I have to tell you a bit of a murder story, don't I? We cannot do a full tour in a cemetery without talking about a murder. We have a very sad murder actually that happened here in 1895. It's a lady called Emily Coombs. She was stabbed in her bed, and when it went to the Old Bailey, the 2 defendants, they were 12 and 13 years old. They were Emily's son. So that's really sad. Those boys, you know, in the 1890s, they would have grown up in the shadow of Jack the Ripper, you know. At the time, kids would read the illustrated police news. They'll read a lot of those penny dreadfuls. And those stories were very violent. In the 1890s, there were a few examples of kids playing Jack the Ripper at school. So quite worrying, really. Those penny dreadfuls, they were little cheap literature that was accessible to the working classes because they'll cost you a penny. They were often inspired by real murders. They'll use the real name of the victims of the murder, but they were fictions. And Robert Coomb, the bigger one of the brothers, he was a big fan of penny dreadfuls. So Emily is buried here somewhere behind those fancy graves there in the cheap ones next to the wall. And what happened is that Emily was often alone with the boys because their dad, Robert Sr., he was I was going to say he was a seaman, but I don't know how to say seaman properly. When I say seaman, it sounds like I say something else. So he was employed by the National Steamship Company. So he was he worked on ships, and he was often away. He worked on those ships transporting immigrants to America, and sometimes even beef or muttons or whatever it might be. And when he left with money he left some money for his boys and wife to be able to survive for the few weeks when he was away. And very often when he was away, Robert, so the 13 years old, he slept with his mother. That's just a bit odd because you know, they had enough space. They were working class, but they were not the poorest. This area was poor. They were in a few miles away, but it really wasn't the poorest of all. So they didn't sleep together because they needed the place. They just did. Robert had an interesting personality. He was obsessed by murders. he had run away from home a few times before. He had once, a year earlier, he had run away to get on a train to Chelmsford in Essex because he wanted to see a famous trial. James Reed, that was, it was called the Southend murderer. So very famous trial at the time. And Robert, that was 12 at the time, he ran away from home to jump on a train. He didn't even have enough for the fare, so he actually walked 20 miles, slept in the bushes, all of that to go and see the murderer face to face, you know. So he had some strange interest. And Nathanael, his little brother, Natty, was following him quite often. And anyway, one Sunday night, well, the boys had already bought a knife with the intention to kill their mother. And that very night, Robert, in bed with his mum, he stabbed his mum. And he stayed in bed with her when in the morning she was still in agony. She was not quite dead yet. He went to tell Natty, "I've killed mother." Natty did not believe him, so he opened the bedroom. He saw his mother there, bloody, still in agony. Would you believe the two boys left? They went to Lord's cricket ground to watch a cricket game. Horrible, you know, like, you know. So they went to see cricket. They came back. They actually went to the docks the next day to find a chap called James Fox. He was a friend of their father. He was in his 40s. Fox is often described as well, we don't know whether he was diagnosed with any learning difficulties or anything, but he was really often described as not the brightest. And they went to tell Fox that their mum had gone away to Liverpool, and she had asked the boy to come and fetch him. They'll pay him to take care of them, to mind them. And there was going to be better money than a day of labor at the docks. So Fox came, and he stayed with them in the property. The boys had locked the bedroom upstairs where the dead mother was laying on the bed. And then they enjoyed their week. They went to see cricket a few times. They actually went back to write a letter to their father's employer at the National Steamship Company, asking them for money because they claimed Emily had to go to hospital and there was a medical bill to pay. And eventually the neighbors started to be a little worried because it smelled, there was a smell coming from the property. And the neighbors told Emily Coombs, another one, the sister-in-law. She was also called Emily. She was the boy's aunt. And Emily came and knocked at the door. Fox opened the door. She had never met him before. She was like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm a friend of the family. Emily is gone to Liverpool." And she found it really odd because the Fox was dressed up in the clothes of Robert Sr. And she came actually right here on the street behind the cemetery here. The grandmother used to live here. And the grandmother did not know anything about Emily going to Liverpool. They sent a telegram to Liverpool and Emily was definitely not there. So the aunt came back, she knocked at the door, she pushed the door, little Natty escaped through the window. And she went straight upstairs because she believed their mother was there. She had got a key from the landlord already. And as they opened the door, they made the dreadful discovery. Emily Coombs' body had been there laying for over a week on her bed. Apparently she was ravaged by maggots. Later on at the trial, when they described the scene, a lot of people fainted, including police officers. And so Robert and Fox were arrested. Little Natty was found later on and he was also arrested. Robert claimed that he had indeed killed his mum because she was being violent with Natty. And Fox did not know anything about it, apparently. It's hard to believe that he would not, I mean, he slept in that property for a week. It's hard to imagine that he did not smell the horrible smell that was there, if the neighbors could smell it. So they went to trial, of course. And you know, Robert was 13, but he could have been hanged. You know, that's willful murder. At the time, the age of kind of responsibility for a boy was considered to be 14 and 16 for a girl, but he could have been charged criminally responsible anyway. So they tried to plead insanity, because if he acted while he was insane, then you know, it was a different. It was going to be a different penalty. He probably would have been better off with because if he was sentenced to hang, they probably would have actually not done it. The last time a young boy had been hanged, it was, I think, 1831. It was a boy in Rochester, 14 years old, that had murdered for 9 shillings. So that was, you know, many years before that. And actually, they decided, the jury went for insanity. So Robert was sent to Broadmoor. You know, it's a prison / asylum for the insane criminals, and the Fox was acquitted. It's a bit hard to believe, but apparently he did not know anything about it. He believed he was called to mind the kids. Nathalie was acquitted as well, and he immigrated to Australia. And 17 years later, eventually Robert was released from Broadmoor. And yeah, exactly, Kurt, the youngest inmate in Broadmoor. And although there was a boy that was quite young that came a bit later, I think he was 17, maybe, a horrible chap that murdered babies in Angel. I think they were at Broadmoor together later on. Where is this? Andy is asking. We are in Tower Hamlet Cemetery in East London. To give you an idea, we're in Bow, well, between Bow and oops. I've got a fly, a big fly. I don't know what they are, but they keep jumping on me on my gimbal. Yeah, just south of Bow, basically. And so yeah, he was. And actually, very interestingly, when he was released, he went to Australia as well at the age of 30. Both of the boys actually joined the army. They fought in the First World War. Much later on, when he died, they found out there's a lady lately that did a book about the story. It's called The Wicked Boy. It's named after the aunt. She used to call him the Wicked Boy. And apparently they found that he had in Australia a little neighbor that was terribly treated by, his parents were violent, and he actually took the little boy with him. The author, she was actually able to meet that little boy. There was 91, I think, when she met him. He's now passed away, but, it's not quite clear whether he knew that Robert had been a murderer and he loved him anyway. But, you know, when you see that he's taken care of a little boy that was a victim of violence, you know, you can put everything in question and maybe think, maybe it was true, maybe he was trying to protect his little brother Natty all along, who knows. Anyway, shocking murder, really. And if you see those graves here, they all date back to the time of the First World War. That's about the time when we stopped spending a massive amount of money in monuments. You know, with the Victorians before that, they used to do some grand monuments, and with the First World War, when suddenly so many young men died for we kind of stopped that. And talking about the First World War, we have a few victims of tragedies here in the cemetery, and one of them, it's the Silvertown explosion. We have an area here called Silvertown. It was very industrial. A lot of factories were there, and they said that at the time, every single household in the country probably owned at least one item that had been manufactured in Silvertown, to give you an idea. And through the war, to help the war effort, they decided to convert one of those factories into making explosive TNT. Tons of TNT every day, 9 tons a day, I think, were produced. It was very dangerous, but, they didn't have time to, and very sadly, one evening, well, luckily it was in the evening, it was at 7 p.m., so the kids were out of school already because 32 schools were damaged. There was a massive, massive explosion. About 900 homes were partially destroyed or fully destroyed, 32 schools. I think it's 73 dead, but there were a lot of victims that were shocked. There's a lady, to give you an example, she broke 4 fingers trying to rescue a little toddler from the debris, because he was under a big pile of rocks. So yes, some of those, very sadly, some of those victims are buried here somewhere. We have another disaster that happened around here as well in 1878. We spoke about it in my tour about Elizabeth Stride, the Ripper victim, because she pretended to have been on the boat. It is the Princess Alice disaster. So that was a leisure boat that would leave London every morning, like 9 or 10:30 in the morning, to go down to Kent, to Gravesend and Sheerness, and they'll be like a day out. They'll go down and they'll come back the same evening. So on board, you'd have families, you'd have people courting, you'd have a lot of those Victorians on a leisure day, and they'll come back in the evening, but they were different boats. You could come at 5, 5:30, 6:30, so they never really knew how many exactly were on board, and the kids were free, so they didn't have a total tally of the passenger. And that very night in September, the ship had a collision with another ship called the Bywood Castle. The Princess Alice was splitted into 2 and sank. Hundreds of passengers were drowned. And at the time, a lot of people did not know how to swim. And even if you did know how to swim, some were rescued by another boat behind it called the Duke of Teck. The Thames River at the time was like an open sewer, untreated sewer. It was full of typhus, cholera, tuberculosis, all those, so a lot of people sadly passed away after being rescued. And the victims, we don't know how many exactly, but probably nearly 700. They were, a lot of them ended up floating here around Beckton or Charlton. A lot of them were found south of the river, and they were actually buried in Charlton. And the ones that were found here, they were kept on this side until they could be identified. The identification process probably was horrible. Imagine looking for your loved ones, having to look at 700 bloated blue bodies to try to find them, because they didn't know who was on board, because they didn't know how many kids, they didn't know on which boat the passengers were coming back. So yeah, a lot of them, the one that were found on the north of the river, and some that were not identified as well, some were buried here. What they did is they kept some of their items of clothing with a little number. So if people wanted to identify later on, they could check the items of clothing. Catherine Booth from the Salvation Army, she tried to help. It was a horrible, horrible disaster. And This part of the cemetery here, you'll see less grave, well actually no graves at all, because the cemetery closed in the 1960s, and the Greater London County, well, the London authorities, whatever it's called, they cleared out a lot of the graves. They wanted to make it an actual park, and a lot of the local people were not happy with that, so they rebelled, and finally we saved most of the graves, but most of the south part here has been completely cleared out. The bodies are still here, but no headstones. It has also been bombed quite a lot through the Second World War. Both of the chapels were bombed. The mortuary and the toilets have been bombed as well. Yeah, very sad, Natasha, yeah. And there's another disaster from which some victims are here. It is the Bethnal Green disaster. Through the Second World War, you know, they had those blackouts in the evening because the Nazis were bombing, and they did not want people to have the lights on because they wanted to make it harder for the enemy. You know, if you try to drop a bomb, if you don't see where you're dropping it, it's a bit harder. So most nights, you know, they'll have blackouts. Even the buses, they'll have to run with no lights or nothing. So there were actually a lot of accidents on the road. And that very night, the siren went on. So everyone ran to shelter in the underground. Bethnal Green had been it had been built, but it wasn't actually up and running yet, and it was used as a shelter. Every night, people used to shelter in the underground. It was like an interesting community down on the tracks there. There's a movie, if you wonder what it looked like, there's a movie called It's a Lovely Day Tomorrow, a movie from the 70s. It's quite interesting to see the life at night in those shelters, because, you know, it was wartime, but life went on, you know, they had a life, they had a social life, they had, you know, everything down the underground. And very sadly, that very evening, because the siren went on, everyone rushed and ran into the underground station. The bus number 8 actually dropped quite a few people, and everyone rushed down. It would have been dark in the staircase. Well, there was like a light bulb, but it was with some black paint over it, so it was very, very dark. And one lady fell down with her baby, then another lady, and then hundreds of people fell on one another. It doesn't mean that they were all laid down. It's a phenomenon that can happen to you even when you're standing up. Some people sometimes refer to it as vertical stacking. It's like if you have too many people pushed against one another, you cannot physically breathe. Your rib cage is stuck. I know because it happened to me at a football game in Marseille. Horrible. Luckily, they moved quite quickly, so I was able to breathe. But it's absolutely horrible. You're so crushed in together, you cannot physically move your rib cage. I've never been to a football game ever since. Well, no, that's not true. I used to work in football games. I used to be a mascot. I was the chicken Lily in Tottenham, but I've not actually been to see the game because I'm scared of this type of events now. It's I've not had a comment in the chat for a while. Oh, good, you're still here. Good. I was starting to wonder. And so those there were about 300 people involved. Yes, I was Lily, Linda. Yes, I was not the official Lily, but I was often covering. If you see the official photo with the players, I think 2020, I'm there. You can tell straight away when it's me because Lily normally she's got skinny chicken legs. So if you see big chubby legs, it's me. Anyway, so the people were stacked on top of one another. Many of them couldn't breathe. 173 passed away out of about 300 involved. Some of them that were closer to the door, the exit, they managed to survive. But yeah, many died. And because it was wartime, they did not put it in the press because they did not want the enemy to know about it. Well, that was the same with the Silverton explosion, because they didn't want to give ideas to the enemy. They kind of kept it quiet. Actually, apparently, some of the journalists, they tried to bribe some of the kids to get some information. Some of the journalists even put it accidentally or wrongly as a bombing. It was not a bombing. There was no bombs at all. They did expect a bombing that night because the day before, the RAF had dropped 251 bombs over Berlin. So they did expect a little revenge, but that did not happen. The siren went on because of the aircraft rockets that went that night. There were allegations of a cover-up, says Kurt. Well, yeah, and from what I read, there's also, people were asking for explanation and compensation. The authorities, they claim that there was a panic, and it's the panic that was guilty. When some of the witnesses, they said that there was no panic. It's just that the staircase was way too dangerous because there was no railing in the middle and stuff. But that there was actually no panic, and that's why so many died, because people kept coming in. They didn't realize there was a major accident on the staircase. So yeah, very sadly, some of them are buried here, and they now have a monument. It's fairly new, I think 2016 or 2018. 18 maybe. That's it's called Stairway to Heaven. So that's an architect that was a bit disappointed that there was only a little plaque in Bethnal Green. So he's built this lovely memorial for them. 2017, well, right in the middle. And yeah, I think it's our next monument is 2016, the Barnardo's monument. Anyway, before to move on and talk about Barnardo, I want to show you a little memorial here that I think it's quite cute. So we talked about the Blitz. The East End of London was very much bombed through the Second World War, because we're quite close to the docks. So obviously, it's an area that's for the Nazis it was good to bomb the docks, and there were a lot of casualties. There's a little hero, by the way. She's not buried here, but she was a little lady that was 25 when she became a doctor, and she was helping at the shelter, volunteering, and she would literally go out through the bombing. Hannah Billig, her name is. She's not here. She's buried in Israel. But amazing little lady. That was really rare to be a lady at the time. And not only would she help through the bombing, but she'd go out of the shelter to rescue people getting injured herself. She actually had a broken leg and kept helping people. Yes, exactly. The Angel of Cable Street, she was known as. So yeah, we've had some amazing stories, and this is a memorial for all the victims of the Blitz in Poplar, and it's quite interesting because it's been built with some of the bricks from the bombing. So some of the buildings that have been destroyed, they've picked up some bricks to build this lovely memorial. So that's quite cute. And let me show you, I said I didn't want to show you too many important people today, but I'll show you one anyway. And let me see if I can zoom in a bit. You might not, it's so overgrown, but in the distance there you might see a little wooden structure. That's to represent the chapel that was bombed. Both of the chapels have been bombed, but there's a little structure there to remember it by. And let me show you Will Crooks. Will Crooks was a docker. If any of you followed my dark tales of the docks, we might have spoken about the life of the dockers at the time. It was casual labor. They never knew when they were going to get a day of work to feed their families. Will Crooks, he had a life, a childhood, a little bit like a Oliver Twist childhood, really. I think he was in and out of the workhouse as a kid. And he was involved, so in that's an interesting gentleman. Have I been in those places before? Oh, I do a lot of research, Laurie. Yeah, a lot of reading, and yeah. And the so Crooks, the monument. We've got quite a few children buried here. 513 to be precise, that are, well, they died in the care of the Barnardo's children charity. For the ones that don't know about Barnardo's, it is a charity that helps feed thousands of little Paddington bears. You might remember when Queen Elizabeth II passed away, because the little Paddington had become such a royal mascot over the last few months. A lot of people were dropping flowers. We'll get to that a bit later. So yeah, all those little bears, they didn't know what to do with them. The royal parks actually told people to stop dropping bears because they didn't know what to do with them. And eventually, Camilla, she's the patron now. It used to be Queen Elizabeth II until 2016, and then she passed on the responsibility to Camilla. Anyway, let me tell you a bit more about Thomas Barnardo. He was originally from Ireland, 1850, but then he kind of rediscovered his faith to go all the way to China. There was some massive, terrible people that couldn't go. And to help orphans and all that. And one day is it breaking up? Oh, I don't know if it's on my side. One day there was a boy, Jim Jarvis, that wanted to stay there. He wanted to stay and sleep at the school. And Barnardo said, "No, you've got to go home, mate." And the boy said, "No, I've got no home." And Barnardo was like, "But where do you sleep then?" And he agreed. The boy agreed to take Thomas Barnardo to. It's next to the Petticoat Lane Market, to where the boys were sleeping. So he took Barnardo to a roof, like not like an attic, a roof, literally on the roof, a little shelter, but open to the elements. But also, workhouses were there. You know, that story might have been a little. One day he went to, so he had a few spaces at the fish market in the city. Apparently they love to beg around there. He went to approach the boys and he said, "Oh, I've got a space in my orphanage. Would any of you like to come?" And he had a few boys that agreed. And apparently, coming from the back, there was a boy that said, me sir, take me, sir." And Barnardo said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm full for today. What's your name?" And the boy said, "Did I lost you?" "Uh-oh. No, I'm still here. I'm gonna try to move. I don't know if I've had a signal drop or anything. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?" Oh, I'm back now. Okay, good. Thank you. It was dropping out. Okay, cool. I'm glad I'm back. Oh, it comes and goes still. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna try to move quicker to a better area. Is it any better now? Let me know. Okay, you can hear me. Good. Do you know when did the story cut? Were we talking about the fish market? The sun cut out too. Can you hear me now? It's the ghost, yeah. So I'll just get back in the story. So after having opened his orphanage, right when I began about Barnardo, okay. So Barnardo moved to London, where he witnessed poverty, horrible poverty, and he decided to open a rag school, a school for boys that could not afford to have an education. And apparently one day at the school, one boy, Jim Jarvis, wanted to sleep there. He did not want to go home, he wanted to sleep in the school. So Barnardo was like, no, you've got to go home. And the boy was like, I've got no home, sir. And then Barnardo asked the boy to take him to wherever he was sleeping at night. So he took him to a roof in next to the Petticoat Lane Market, when the roof was like a bit sheltered but exposed to the elements, and every night about 12 boys were sleeping there, exposed to the element. So Barnardo decided to open an orphanage, a school for boys. At the time, you know, there were not many. The option really was the street or the workhouse for those boys. So he opened an orphanage, and apparently one day he went to the fish market because he knew there were a lot of orphans begging by the fish market. The story might have been a little bit romanticized by Thomas Barnardo himself when he wrote his memoir, but apparently those boys were begging there, and he had a few space at the orphanage, so he decided to go and ask the boy if they wanted, if some of them wanted to come. And one boy came from the back, and he was like, me sir, take me, sir. And Barnardo was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm full now, but be there next week. I might have a few more space next week, so come back next week. And I've got a notification from Streamlab. Okay, no, that's cool. It's are you still here? Yeah, because the chat is quiet again. So the boy wanted a spot, and Barnardo couldn't take him. And Barnardo was like, "What's your name?" And he said, "I'm John, sir. I'm John Somos, sir." And someone said from the back, "Now we call him Carrots." So Barnardo was like, "Okay, Carrots, be there next week. I'll have a spot for you next week." And the boy said, "Okay." Apparently, very sadly, a few days later, the boy was found dead by one of the porters at the market. He was dead of probably starvation. And that's that very day that Barnardo decided to never, ever reject any destitute children ever again. He later on opened a home for girls as well. Barnardo himself, he had 7 kids, one of them with learning difficulties, Down syndrome, and he specialized in giving an education to everyone, even kids with disabilities. He tried to protect them from the sex trade as well, to avoid them being trafficked. He looked for families to take them on board, adoption, often in the countryside, so they could help in the farm. And 513 of those kids are buried here somewhere in unmarked graves. There have been a bit of controversy as well with the Barnardo's charity. He was accused of faking before and after photos. He was one of the things he was doing. He would take photos of kids coming in looking all very sad, and then later on with a job and a job uniform, so he was accused of faking those photos, and he was also accused of kidnapping, would you believe? Adoptions, because some of those families were so poor, some of those parents were so addicted to gin and alcohol, some of those kids had no shoes running on the street, and sometimes their parents would give them gin to stop the symptoms of starvation. So he said, yes, I have taken those kids. He was acquitted on 88 counts. And this is the monument that we unveiled recently. Jean Clark is the lady that had the crowdfunding to raise £10,000 to have it created. So that's a monument for all those kids that passed and that are buried here somewhere in the cemetery. So beautiful. Yeah, Natasha, I'm getting to there. Yeah, so beautiful. Beautiful monument. So yeah, there was a bit of controversy. Well, there was first this is Frederick Charrington. He was also a philanthropist himself. Fred Charrington was he was the heir of a brewery. Alcohol. Apparently, one day he spotted a gentleman, well, a guy, not a gentleman, a guy drunk outside of a pub, one of his pubs, beating up his wife, and he decided that very day he decided to stop alcoholism and go into philanthropy, and he was the one accusing Barnardo's of doing those kidnappings. But he also accused William Booth and the Salvation Army of doing dodgy stuff. Fred Charrington, would you believe, is actually a Ripper suspect. Not a very good one, actually a terrible one. But there was an author that tried to prove that you could build up a case against anybody as being Jack the Ripper. And you know, with the Jack the Ripper story, a lot of men also had their lives destroyed because they were accused wrongly of being Jack the Ripper. So anyway, that author tried to prove a point. He accused Fred Charrington of being Jack the Ripper because Charrington tried to stop prostitution. At the time, you could report a brothel to the authorities and they'll close it down for you. He managed to close down nearly 200 brothels. But some said that he was actually pushing those ladies out on the street, pushing them into the hands of the Ripper. Who knows? Anyway, let's get back to Barnardo. So yes, some of you said in the chat about the kids being sent abroad. So it started with a good intention, but yeah, the Barnardo's charity decided to send some of those orphans to the colonies, so Australia and Canada mainly, to give them a family, and they'll go often to work in a farm. So it did start with a good intention, but yes, it does look like the charity probably over-trusted human nature. There were some success story. Yeah? Some of the kids moved to a lovely family, and then they actually married their adoptive sisters and became the heir of the farm. But there were a lot of abuse, physical, sexual. Very often, well, actually always, those kids were sent with a postcard already stamped. And later on, the kid or the family would send back the postcard to the Barnardo's charity. A lot of those postcards have actually survived. And when you look at them, some of them, it's like the father of the family that's like, oh, I expected a stronger one, but that would do, thank you. Like if they were talking about, like, oh, she was abused, oh, sorry to hear that. Yeah, there's another voyager, Casey from Canada. Her dad did not have a great experience either. So yeah, there were a lot of abuse. Is the Barnardo's charity responsible, or is it, you know, but yeah, and on top of that, some of those kids, they were really hard to trace because, you know, some of those kids were not orphans. They would have been removed from their families because the families had fallen into hard times. But sometimes years later, the family got a bit of money and they wanted to get their kids back, and they were really hard to trace back. And actually, so then there was the official migration child project from the 20s to the 60s. Government was also part of it. And yeah, there were quite a few cases of abuse, and those kids that might have suffered from abuse. Anyway, before we finish the tour, I wanted to tell you a bit about the Jack the Ripper connections that we have here. First, Barnardo himself. In 1888, he went to a lodging house in Flower on Dean Street. He wanted to speak to those ladies in those houses, like a host, speak to the kids, having kids in those houses. And he spoke to a few ladies. One of them was tall. She was pretty but drunk, and apparently she said to him, "No one cares what becomes of us. We all up to no good. One of us could be killed next. If we had helped the life of us years ago, we would have never come to this." Barnardo believed that that lady might have been Elizabeth Stride. And if that was the case, she was indeed killed next. But the truth is, any of those ladies could have been Elizabeth Stride. All of those ladies were destitute and fallen into hard times, and all of those ladies could have been next, you know. So yeah, Barnardo's could have met Elizabeth Stride, and Jack the Ripper might be buried here. There's a strong suspect. It's not necessarily my favorite, but it's a good suspect. His name is Charles Lechmere, or Charles Cross. He's the gentleman that found the first body, well, the first of the canonical five. He found the body of Polly Nichols. And he was, so he found the body, and he was kind of just looking over the body when someone came behind him. Some people today, at the time, they did not suspect it. Well, the police didn't really have anything against him, but some people today actually believe that when he was in the process of finding the body, he was not actually in the process of finding her, but in the process of killing her. And it is possible. I mean, you know, he's a good suspect because he was on the scene of the crime. There's a documentary somewhere about Charles Cross, or Charles Lechmere. Cross was actually his stepfather. There's a documentary somewhere that's very convincing. I think it's on YouTube. But when you go back to the facts, it's not that straightforward. He, you know, he was there, but he refused to touch Polly Nichols. If he did have killed her, he would have wanted to touch her, so he'd have an excuse to have some blood on himself. So yeah, he's one of the suspects, and he's buried here somewhere with a lot of his family. And there's one more connection with the Ripper. This is the grave of the gentleman that did the autopsy on Polly Nichols. He was a local doctor, and when they found the body, they went to knock at his door to ask him to double check that she was indeed passed, and then did the autopsy. I'm sure he was an amazing doctor, but he's one of those people that are probably only remembered because of their connection to the Ripper story. Killers frequently return to the crime. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you know, when you do investigation, you do want to look at the people that were there, you know. So yeah, he's a good suspect. But there are many good suspects. So yeah. Anyway, this is gonna be the end of the tour. Let me show you my face again, and let me know if you have any questions for me before we go. Sorry for the little signaling issue earlier. I hope that didn't last for too long. And if you guys want to see a bit more of me, tomorrow night I'm going back to Charing Cross. I've got my Dark Tales of Charing Cross in the evening, 9 p.m. UK time. I don't see anything in the chat anymore. I hope you're still there. Uh-oh. I need to try to move. Did I lose you again? I don't know if you can hear me, but thank you very much for coming today. Thanks everyone that was able to leave a little tip. Again, that's greatly appreciated. You know, we do not get any income from YouTube or anything like that. At the moment, the only money I get is straight from your generosity. Oh good, the chat is back. I had a little, it was gone for a second. I hope I didn't lose you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Trish. Thanks, Lethargy. If anyone did ask me any question in the last minute or so, feel free to ask again, because I had lost the chat for some reason. And if anyone needed a link for the tips, it should be pinned at the top of the chat. I've got a Buy Me a Coffee and a PayPal Me. PayPal Me, I think there's no minimum, and you can pay in any currency. The Buy Me a Coffee, it's £4 a coffee, because that's the price of a fancy coffee in London. And if any of you were new to me, I hope I got you hooked, and I hope you'll give me a little subscribe. And see you soon. Bye bye.